Boker Tov. Good morning, everyone. I hope it's a great day, a Boker Tov, as we would say. So, in the beginning of this week's Torah portion, the first verse says like this: Eila toldot Noach. These are the offsprings of the story of Noach. Noach, ish tzaddik. Noach was a righteous man. Tamim haya b'dorotav, he was complete in his generation. Et Elokim mithalach Noach. Noach walked with God. As I told you many times, the rabbis, every nuance, every detail has a reason. And the rabbis ask, why does the Torah mention Noach's name 3 times? Eila told Noach, these are the offspring of Noach. He could have just said he was righteous and he went with God. Why does he have to repeat his name? Noach ish tzaddik. Et Elokim mithalach Noach. He went with God. How many times could you mention one person's name in one verse? The proper way would have been to mention it once and then to reference it. Why does it mention it 3 times? And the Medrash tells us a fascinating thing. The Medrash tells us that Noach was one of very few people who lived through 3 worlds. Not 1 world, not 2 worlds, but 3 worlds. What do you mean? Noach was born into a world where you had parents and grandparents, where there was stability, where you worked hard, you earned, you succeeded. All you needed was ambition and success and hard work, and you were able to climb a ladder. That was the first world Noach was born into. A world of stability, a world of family, of love, of joy, of hard work to succeed. But then came the second world Noach lived in. Noach lived in a world that saw devastation that never happened before. Everything was destroyed. Not one living creature other than Noach and his family survived. Only those who were in the Teva. Destruction and devastation of the greatest order. The worlds were flooded. And then Noach lived in a world of afterwards. The world where we had to come out and rebuild. These 3 worlds take 3 different types of personality. The first world that we all live in, a world of stability, takes hard work, takes ambition. The second world, a world of destruction, a world filled with devastation. All you have is the instinct of survival. You just want to survive it. And then you have the third world, a world where you have to be able to get out there and smile. Not an innocent smile of a young person, but a smile of the hope that light will prevail over darkness, that you will be able to smile again, that good will overcome bad and hardship. The Midrash says only 3 people lived in worlds like this. Noach, Daniel the prophet, who lived before the temple, saw it rebuilt, and then who lived in the time of the temple, saw it destroyed, and then saw the second temple rebuilt. And Job, who we read about in the prophets, who saw so much suffering, where he had a beautiful family and everyone was destroyed and wiped out, and then he rebuilt again. And the Torah tells us that Noach was one of those remarkable people who was able to live through these 3 worlds and be able to come back and survive and thrive. In fact, after Noach leaves the Teva, after he leaves the ark, we don't read much about him. We read about him planting a vineyard and getting inebriated, drinking a lot. Maybe he suffered from PTSD. Who knows? But it was a hard world. And in a certain sense, each and every one of us lives through this world, in the macro and the micro. In the micro, we live through this world. We're born into a world. We have parents. There's love around us. There's innocence. There's hope. We come home every day to the embrace of loving parents, hopefully, most of us. And we have a delicious dinner. We go off to schools. We have parents who take us on vacation. We live in beautiful communities and neighborhoods. That's the first world we live in. And I wish, idealistically, if you could stay in that world forever, it would be great. But the reality is that we don't get that opportunity. At some point, spaghetti hits the fan, as we would say. And suddenly, this crisis, a loved one dies, someone gets divorced, your parent loses their job, you're thrown out of school, you don't get into the college you want to, your friends pick on you, you're lonely, you can't find your match, you get fired from your first job. Suddenly you live in a world of devastation. And then we have to have the courage to live in the third world, to rebuild that hope after the pain, to rebuild trust and faith that it could be better, that we could smile again, that there could be hope again. Think about all of our grandparents who lived through the Holocaust. Think about, they grew up in a time, it wasn't perfect for Jews in Europe, but Jews were surviving. They lived, they thrived in a certain sense. They had communities, they had the shtetl, they had Judaism, they had love, they had joy, they had family. And then came the devastation of the Holocaust, where 6 million Jews were butchered. The world was destroyed. And all you could think of is the instinct to maybe survive, to maybe live another day, to be able to get through the hell that they watched their families and their communities go through. Communities that had 10, 20, 50,000 were only 10, 50, 100, or 5 were surviving. And then to have to come out of that devastation, of that destruction, of that hate-filled world, and to rebuild again, to be able to smile when the sun comes up, to be able to see that the sun could come up after so much darkness and fire and devastation and hurt. Think about, that's going to be a miracle that's going to go down in the annals of history, that these survivors, almost all of them, rebuild their lives and rebuild families and had stories of success. They lived 3 worlds like Noach. Eila told Noach, these are the offsprings of Noach. Noach was a righteous man. Noach went with God. Even after all the destruction, Es Elokim mitalech Noach. Noach had the courage to see God, to see hope, to see love, to see the opportunity for rebuilding. You know, there's a lovely woman who lives in California today. Her name is Edith Eger. She wrote a book, The Chosen, a few years ago, and she just actually wrote a second book, The Gift. She grew up in Budapest, and she was a rising star in ballet. She was going to go to the Olympics when suddenly she was told that because she was Jewish, she wouldn't be able to. Devastation. She was a young girl. And then the worst is, after a couple of years, her and her family were thrown into the barracks, into the Auschwitz, into the trains taking to Auschwitz. And on the train as they were going to Auschwitz, her mother told her something that she'll never forget. She says, we don't know where we're going. We don't know what's going to happen to us. But remember, my daughter, no one can ever take what you put into your mind. And that's what let her survive. She came to Auschwitz, and Mengele Yemach Shemoy, the doctor from hell, had her play ballet and dance ballet for him while he was killing and butchering Jews. She would close her eyes and imagine the barracks floor was the floor of the Budapest Symphony, and she would dance for him. She saw devastation after devastation, people tortured, people killed, mothers in labor with their feet tied together. As she writes in her book, she lived through the death march from 1,000, where 2,000 of them, she was 75 pounds, 2,000 of them marched, and only 100 survived. And she was pulled out of a rubble of dead people by the liberators. She still had her back broke until today. She suffers from that. And then you know what she decided to do after the war? She decided to become a psychologist, to use her devastation to rebuild people's inner worlds that are shattered. And she says something interesting. She says 2 people come to cry to you. One of them is crying that their husband has lymphoma and is dying. And the other one cries to you because they couldn't get their brand new Tesla that just came out. And you say one is so trivial and one is such an important, such a painful thing, but the truth is they're both crying. Just one doesn't know how to bring out what's really making them cry. The one that's crying about the Cadillac is not really crying about the Cadillac. About the Tesla is not really crying about the Tesla. They're crying about a life wasted, about dreams not realized, about giving up things that they really didn't want to do. So it's about directing where is our pain coming from, and how do we find what we're crying about and rebuild that world. And why do I tell you this? Because I was thinking about the world we're living in now. I was thinking about the world we lived in before coronavirus, and the world we're living through now, and the world will hopefully relive after coronavirus. And many people's lives were shattered. They lost loved ones, they lost their jobs, they lost that innocence that the world is easy and perfect. They saw so much challenge. Look at young kids growing up in a world where they have to wear a mask, they can't go to school for 6 months. But we have to learn from Noach. Even in our lives, when we find something painful, Something shatters our life. And we're suddenly thrown out of our instance, as Noach was from the world into the flood. We have to have the courage to be able to rebuild afterwards and to find hope, to find light, to find day, to find joy in the world that's still in front of us. And how do we do that? By having faith in God. Baruch HaGemer Asher Yiftach Ba'Hashem V'Haya Hashem Yiftach. King David tells us in Psalms, we say at the end of benching grace after meals, praises the man who puts his faith, puts his trust in God, and God becomes his rock of trust. That's what we need. God bless you all. Have a great day. See you tomorrow.